So if we look at number 1, if we go through number 1, we're going to prime factor. Okay, so we want to think of multiples of 40 and break it down as far as we possibly can. Sorry, I'm going to try and fix some lighting here. Okay, so if we start prime factoring 40, okay, we can split that into a 4 and a 10. 4 splits into 2 times 2. 10 splits into 2 times 5. If you need to, use your calculator and just start dividing out numbers, right? So if you see that 10 goes into it, take 40 and divide it by 10, right? That's where the 4 and 10 come from. So we now have a 2 times a 2 times a 2 times a 5. And we're going to look for any pairs. Anything that we have a pair of, we are going to circle. Okay, so I'm circling these 2's. Any pair goes out in front of the square root sign 1 time. So even though this is 2 2's, it only counts 1 time. Okay, anything that's not circled gets multiplied together and stays on the inside. So 2 times 5 is 10. So our answer is 2 square root 10. Okay, let's look at number 2. Same thing. This ends in 0, so I see that I can take a 10 out. So 22 times 10. 22 becomes 2 times 11. 10 becomes 2 times 5. So this is a 2 times 2 times 5 times 11. I can bring that 2 out in front. Okay, so 2 and then 5 times 11 is 55. And so my answer is 2 square root 55. Number 3, I'm going to prime factor the 48. So I see that's divisible by 2. So 2 and 24. You can do 2 and 12. 2 and 6. 2 and 3. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4 2's. And a 3. And then I have 3 x's because it's x to the 3rd power and 7 y's. So here's a pair. Here's a pair. Keep going with all my pairs. Okay, so a 2 comes out and a 2 comes out. So 2 times 2 is 4. X comes out in front. A y times a y times a y. So there's 3 of them. So that's y to the 3rd. And then inside I'm left with a 3xy. So my final answer is 4x y to the 3rd square root 3xy. In different colors so we don't get them confused here. Okay, so we'll prime factor on number 4. We're just going to prime factor the stuff inside. So that gives us a 2 times a 2 times a 3 times a 5. So we have a 2 that comes out in front. The 3 times 5 is left inside. But the 8 was already out here. So 8 times 2, because these are both outside, they get multiplied together, gives us a 16 square root 15. Okay, now, number 5, we could write down x 42 times and circle the pairs, but remember, pairs means how many sets of 2, so we can just take that 42 and divide it by 2, which will give us 21. That means we want 21 x's out in front, so x to the 21st. Okay, then we can take the 23 and divide it by 2. Okay, if you do that in your calculator, you're going to see the 0.5, right? So 11.5, so that means 11 of them come out in front. And the 0.5 tells us that there's 1 left over that doesn't have a pair on the inside. So we'll get x to the 21st, y to the 11th, square root y. Number 6. Factor. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 2's. So 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. 8 comes out in front. There's nothing left over to put inside, so we don't even write down the square root symbol. We do have to remember that that 5 was still out there. So 5 times 8 is 40. We can answer 40. Number 7, when we multiply numbers that are inside together and numbers that are outside together. So 2 times 2 is 4. 5 times 3 is 15. So we get 4 square root 15. Number 8, when we add the numbers in front and we keep the label the same. So 4 plus 7 is 11. And then the square root 3 stays the same. Number 8, we can't add, like we said up here on 8. Oh, sorry, this is really number 9. Sorry, that's a typo. Like we said up here on 8, those square roots needed to match. Over here, they don't match, so we're going to simplify to make them match. So my 8, I'm going to prime factor. I have a pair of 2, so that pair of 2 is coming out in front. There was already a 5 there, so that becomes a 10 square root 2. Now, I can check to see if I can simplify my square root 2, but there are no pairs. So I get a 6 square root 2 minus a 10 square root 2, which will give me a negative 4 square root 2. Number 10, again, the square roots don't match, so I'm going to have to prime factor to see if I can get them to match. So there's a pair of 3s, but there was already a 2 out there, so that becomes a 6 square root 5. Here there's a pair of 3s, but there was already a 6 out there, so that becomes an 18 square root 3. Now, these do not have matching labels, so since those don't match, I can't add them together, and that's as far as I can go with my answer. Number 11, when we're rewriting it, the denominator is the only thing that changes, so that x to the 3rd power is staying the same. Okay, I'm just moving the bottom of the fraction. The x to the 3rd is staying the same, and then I'm putting a radical on top, and that 5 goes in the little hook of the square root. So same thing if I'm going into reverse, that y to the 7th stays the same. Now, we can't see it, but there's a square root, which means there's really a 2 there, and that's what becomes the denominator.